This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. My name is Angelica Solinska. I'm your host. And today I'm joined by Carlie Powell, who is Head of Nurseries at Growing Places, and Jackie Warren, CEO of Growing Places. So thank you both very much for joining the Voice of Early Childhood podcast.
Thanks, Angelica. Thanks for having us.
So today we're going to be discussing a really important issue in early years, really looking at the question of, are we child carers or teachers? So exploring, who are we in early years? What do we call ourselves? What do other people call ourselves, call us, call the sector? And what is the difference between caring for babysitting children and teaching? So these are questions I know that the team at Growing Places often reflect upon. And Carlie and Jackie, you are really dedicated to bringing recognition to early years and the important roles that educators play in children's first 5 years. So these are things that you often reflect upon. And so tell me a little bit about why you feel so strongly about this. I guess it'll be interesting to hear a little bit of the context behind what you do a little bit more, please.
Shall I just start? I'll start. So I think for me, it's a profession that I've been in for over 40 years, and it's one that I love and feel passionately about. I think there's a lot happened in those 40 years, but historically, early years are viewed as the poor relations, I feel, in teaching. And because they're under fives, there is always this thing about caring and babysitting. And I know childminders really struggle with how they're viewed. We have always, part of our role is to educate. It isn't a babysitting job. It isn't just caring. You have to care to be able to teach. We know that relationships are key, attachments are key to a child feeling safe enough to learn. So, of course, you have to do those things, but is that the main part of what we do? And it kind of came to the forefront for us again a couple of months ago when we visited Sweden, having visited Italy, Reggio Emilia, a few times. And you see early years education valued in a way that we strive for. It is, yes, the caring happens, it has to, but it is very much valued as an educational role, as a teaching role, as a caring teaching role. And I guess there's lots of moans and groans, and we all know all those things that are happening. There's some of those things we can't do anything about, but we can do something about how we're seen, how we're perceived. So that's what we've been talking about. How do we?
And Growing Places has 5 nurseries, and I think we see those common threads throughout, and those commonalities in conversations between our educators. And we have such a range of experience, don't we, Jackie? We're really lucky, from apprentices to team members that have been with us for over 20 years, to degree level, some with qualified teacher status. But we still come back to, as a profession, as a sector, they still feel undervalued. And there are so many things that we try and do in-house at Growing Places to kind of bring that value to our team members. But actually, we can't do it on our own. I think anybody working in early years right now would say they feel undervalued as a profession. But actually, rather than just moaning about it, what can we do about it? And we're stronger together. So is it about bringing our voices together and saying, let's really try and get to the root of what this is? There are so many elements to it. There's pay, there are qualifications, there are training, but actually this language and terminology is something that we keep coming back to. Is it changing the language that we use to talk about what we do, what we offer, and will that then change the perception of the profession for others?
It almost feels like it's time for some radical changes. And is the profession ready for that? Are people out there ready for that, to stop moaning and to kind of stand up and stand together and go, okay, it is time that we look at our profession. We reflect all the time on our planning procedures, on our children's interests, how children learn. Over the last 5 years, particularly, how our children learn is very different. How we are as adults is very different. How parents are is very different. So we've had to change and reinvent our procedures, our planning, our curriculum. Always linked to our philosophy and our approach, which is around this image of a child. But is it not time that we do this together as a collective in early years? As teachers, carers, educators, practitioners, all these different words. Is it time we sit together and say, what is it? And if it's about terminology, then it's about what we do and how we project ourselves. Parents perceive us by, yes, what they see in their day-to-day in nursery, but also what's all over the papers and television at the moment, which is, fundamentally all of it is about free childcare.
And we were just discussing this morning. There are two elements there. There's free childcare. So the free part is probably a whole other podcast in itself.
Yeah.
But the childcare part, this is the message coming from our government. It's saying that referring to the profession as childcare. And we've had to look at that because Growing Places is a charity, and it's the name of the company is Growing Places Community Childcare Centres, and that's what it was when
interesting.
20 years ago.
And
so do you disagree with that now? Kind of that doesn't fit with your values?
It really made us, and it is something that we're going to take to the Board of Trustees. Well, we have already started, and to our team members. Is that who we are?
The community, absolutely. We're community-based. Never change that. But we call ourselves Growing Places. That's how everybody knows. But our official name is Growing Places Community Childcare Centres, and we're not childcare centres, So we need to start with ourselves and look at that and be brave about making changes. But it's about this wider message, isn't it? And we're interested, from this podcast, what others will say, what other early years professionals will come back and feedback. Is it just us feeling like this? I'm sure it isn't.
What's been really I suppose useful, beneficial, insightful for me is that Carlie was previously a teacher, a primary school teacher. So she comes with a different headspace on this, and was in her, you can talk about it yourself, but some of the things that have been raised because of Carlie and because of conversations and reflections we have, one of them is around uniform. And we put it out to all of our team members. This, do we continue to have a uniform? Why do we have it? How do we feel about it? And parents. And it was very, very 50-50.
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
But actually, two of the biggest things, one came from Carlie and then other team members, that when they are in any kind of professional meeting, in their polo shirts, they feel less professional, and they feel that they're viewed in a less professional way. Parent said to us, "You all wear the same colour t-shirts. If my child's out running around in the park and they see that colour t-shirt, they would trust anybody wearing that colour t-shirt, and they'd run off with them." So from a safeguarding, but also as a...
Yeah, I mean, when I came, so I was 15 years primary teaching before, and then joined Growing Places 5 years ago, and I just got to the point with the education system. I was ready for change. I needed... the system was so suffocating for me, and I was ready for change. My boys were starting school, so I came across to Growing Places, and And I was really quite surprised at the disparities between how teaching staff are viewed and nursery preschool staff, because it's generically we speaking, there are different variables of quality of care and nurseries, of course, but coming to growing places, I was thinking the knowledge of these nursery nurses, practitioners, educators, these people, it blew my mind. The input and training from the company was incredible. And just because they didn't have QTS, I was struggling to see why they were viewed so differently. It's not as credible, and that's when I bought the uniform. I said, as a teacher, you go to a meeting and you wear you wear professional clothing and you're viewed as a professional. But nurseries are not viewed in the same way. And this is when we started the whole discussion around uniform, what we call ourselves. And it's just gone from there, really, hasn't it?
It's a journey, like anything. I don't know the answers, but I think collectively we would come up with better answers, and we'd feel stronger and more, the word is, but we would feel happier and about those answers and about being linked to it if we're together. If that makes any sense. I think that we all are calling ourselves something different right now. I look through the paper and the advertisements for jobs, and they all say different things. And that's going to be confusing. But it also, if I'm applying for an early years teacher job, do I need to have a degree? Well, maybe that's what the differences are. I've done my degree, I've got my BA, I've got my early years teacher status. Can I now call myself a teacher? Yeah, I guess I can. But
interestingly, I spoke to a range of our team members prior to this podcast around it, about what do you think you should be called? Some said, I don't want to be called a teacher because I'm not a teacher. I don't have my qualified teacher status. And I don't want to work in the school system. I like working in early years, so I don't want to be a teacher. But then when we unpicked, actually, we looked at lots of different definitions of a teacher, and it's someone whose job is to teach, a person who helps students acquire knowledge and competence. A teacher is someone typically in a job at a school or an institution. And when we explained that to them, and actually you are still teaching, do view it differently. Some don't know what to call themselves because they say, I don't have QTS, I don't have a degree. Other people have worked, for their 3-4 years to get their degree. So how can we call ourselves teachers? Because actually we're not qualified teachers. So in some ways, it seems like such a minor thing, a title, a name. And to some people it is, but to other people it's huge, because if they don't know their own definition of who they are, how can they feel that value in a profession of education?
I was going to say, it's a whole identity thing, isn't it? It's, for some people, like you say, it may just be, well, this is just a title and I don't really care about it, but actually it is very much defining what you do day to day and who you are as a person, because your career really, for some people, really defines you. And especially when it's steeped in so many values, around education. And on the point as well, when you were saying about how if we don't know what to call ourselves, and we call ourselves in early years all different names in different settings, and call themselves, their practitioners or educators differently, it's not cohesive. How do we expect others to know what to call us and us as a sector? Like you were saying, in the media, the government calling us different things. And I think in your article, you actually mentioned the EYFS document, the statutory document, and the guidance documents all have different names they use for early years professionals, educators, practitioners. There isn't really reference to teachers there. So it's really interesting how the early years sector or profession is portrayed across even the same, I was going to say, everywhere is different. The government sees us differently to how we may see us, etc. But actually, even within the same setting, within the same area, context, we call ourselves different things. I'm always I started saying educator about 2 years ago because I thought, well, actually practitioner doesn't seem like there's quite enough there, and then exactly what, like you said, we're not teachers because we haven't got that QTS. So, educator felt right, but still there's you want to talk the same language in order to be able to have those conversations and relate to each other. So I slip into practitioner whenever people say practitioner because, I don't want to kind of...
Well, I think we all do that. I said to Carlie, we will change our speak depending on
where we are
and who you talk to.
And the same with putting out job adverts.
Yeah.
Because everyone says practitioner, we'll put practitioner. It's a word I hate. I absolutely hate it. I'm not practicing anything.
We always say, whenever we don't have the answer, but this question comes up, we say to our team members, our staff, we say, what do your children call you? What do children call us? The children will call them teacher.
Teachers.
And so do parents.
Parents say, take this in to show your teacher.
Yeah.
Me and my teacher were doing this. So, we come full circle, Angelica, and that's why we think it's a really interesting discussion to hear.
I think there are some issues to address in that, and some of it is around the professional qualifications and expectations and standards. I think that still has to be addressed. I don't think it has been. And what that qualification looks like. I think is one. Is it fit for purpose? I think that's that's another podcast all on its own.
Yeah, for sure.
And something I'd like to do in my retirement is develop or with anyone who's interested actually, is develop a really good, strong, robust, fit for purpose early years educator program. Because I don't think there's one that's strong enough out there
as well, because we have really high standards of care and education, and we welcome apprentices. We're really proud of our homegrown program, if you like, with our team. But actually, the time it takes to train really good quality early years understanding of child development, that takes a lot of time. Particularly
commitment both sides.
Particularly if the first steps to learning the first course is quite woolly, One of the other things that we were talking about was when we speak to our teachers about their role, actually they're saying at the moment the demands of the job are so much higher than they've ever been before that I feel like the teaching element is the first thing that will slip. So I mentioned this in my article, Angelica, particularly since COVID, the expectations from parents and actually how the role of being in the nursery or the preschool with the children is very much blending into the role of the parent and carer. And that's for lots of reasons, but particularly since the pandemic, that's what we found. Things around toileting, since when is the expectation for toileting been at such an age? It's 18 months to 2 years. It's always been for us. With it dependent upon the child.
We now see it as it's written in Birth to 5 as a school readiness thing that children are toilet trained. And I think, we have got to re-look at child development and child development stages, milestones, physical changes, and when they should happen, and they're linked to physiology, they're linked to things that are happening in your body, and that's why there's this kind of window of opportunity for toilet training, and it's certainly not at 3 or 4 years of age.
And that's what's taking a lot of the time in the nurseries. Other team members are focusing, for example, let's use toileting, for so many children. That becomes all consuming, whereas at that stage, actually,
it shouldn't.
Our children are using digital photography to capture their artwork and edit their artwork, and they're using colour mixing, and there are some most incredible things that we know our children are capable of, right from babies. but actually how can our team members invest that time in teaching them those skills if they're focused on 20 children who need to be on the potty train, you know?
Hi, it's Angelica here. Thank you all for listening in. I'm here to ask for a quick favour from the early years community. In order for the Voice of Early Childhood to continue creating free, valuable content and sharing voices, we need your help. Please hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening on. And if you are listening on a podcast platform, then check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can not only listen, but also watch the podcast and really focus in on the discussions. Or if you are viewing on YouTube already, remember that you can also find us on 19 different podcast platforms. Simply search for The Voice of Early Childhood and subscribe to get a brand new episode every Monday morning, ready for your morning commute or however you start your week. And as always, do share the podcast with colleagues, friends, and parents of young children. We have a lot of interested parents and family members listening in and reading the articles. So let's ensure more of them can access the free content. Let's encourage them to engage and keep these thought-provoking discussions going. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
So it's linking all of their needs, their education alongside the care and the physical needs. But we have to do that together as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's a real partnership with parents. And that's a shared responsibility, not an educational sector's responsibility. It is a parental shared responsibility.
And we love that. We love that shared collaboration with our parents. Like, we wouldn't want it any other way, but it has to be a shared partnership. And that then leads to, you know, what support is there not for what's missing for parents now.
Why is it so
coming
different
to the nurseries?
Yeah, because it is.
It didn't always used to be.
No,
they used to get support from other services, but those services aren't necessarily there now.
And there are lots
more and more is put onto the.
But they weren't there historically. You know, if I think back 30 years, they weren't there. So what? There's so many societal issues within. And I think fundamental to all of this is that we need to sit down together and we need to reinvent and reflect that out, reinvent what that job is, what that purpose is. We are Ofsteded in exactly the same way as every other school, and we're Ofsteded on our safeguarding, our teaching, children's outcomes, our leadership and management. We are not Ofsteded, we are not inspected on just caring for children.
The back end of last year, we were very fortunate, Angelica. We had 3 inspections within 5 weeks. Because we're 5 nurseries, and naturally they came to that cycle of Ofsted inspection. And we have seen a big difference since the previous round of inspections, but we did feel like during each of those visits, we were really able to share the teaching element of what we do.
And how it links to the practice. How
it links. And we did feel like that was really taken on board and recognised by the inspectors, which we did feed back, because it hasn't always been that way, which gives us hope. But
that's a positive, isn't it, in the way that Ofsted see things. So you know, there's obviously different cases, and people have very kind of different views around Ofsted, and it's a challenging kind of topic to address. But in terms of everything that you've mentioned, it is wider, like you just mentioned, societal issues there to address, and the status of the sector more widely, rather than just what do we call ourselves. Actually, it really brings the whole conversation around like the provision of different services, like you were saying, for parents as well. So
but it starts that it's kind of issues. It's in the middle of, we need to address it, because all of it is disconnected. It's really disconnected. I knew exactly what was expected of me and who I was when I started in this profession, and I constantly inwardly reflect at the moment, and then kind of join with others and kind of go, where are we going? Where are we? What is this about right now? And I think these different titles for me is a start, is a start off point to We do need to address it. If there's any sense of belonging to a profession, we need to say what that profession is and what the expectations are. And we can only do that together. There's no point in growing places doing that on their own. So that's why we wanted to kind of start this conversation and see what other people think.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned, you don't think that you're on your own in this. You think that other people probably do have similar views. And I certainly have had conversations with people before, educators, but mainly consultants and early years specialists who do try and talk about these issues as well. Actually, someone that comes to mind is Jan de Biel, who often talks about how important language is and the fact that we should be calling ourselves profession rather than sector. And also the debatable kind of view of we should be talking more about learning rather than play, because actually we obviously value play very much in early years. But are we kind of almost degrading what we're doing because we're not using the same language as everyone else in terms of learning and education and teaching? And then we are misunderstood and we are seen as, in quotations, just playing with children. And that's kind of where it comes from. And there's that debate, obviously, that we need to defend play because it is learning. But at the same time, if we're not using common language that everyone else understands, then we can't get through. If we get through with that common language, then we can bring in the word play, etc., and start to educate wider society.
You talk about this. Are we
do we dumb ourselves down? Actually. And I think
using safe language.
Because we worry what people will think. Or when you travel around to other countries and look at their early years education, we sit down and we reflect, and we've taken lots from it, but we also know that we have a lot to give when we talk to teachers in other countries. And but they do have this commonality of they do talk about teaching and learning, and central to that is play, because play is a fundamental learning tool. It's one of the best learning tools that we have for adults as well as children, and that's well researched and well documented. So Jan's right. Because you don't go into Sweden, you don't go into Italy, you don't go into Finland, and they focus on your ability to play as a teacher. They focus on the children's learning and the image of a child, which is very similar to ours, being curious, being competent, being sociable. And that's how they're born. And your job as an educator, as a teacher, is to help them develop those skills to be the best learners they can. We don't teach children what, we teach them how. And I think that's the really importance of early years, is that we're teaching them how to learn and to have a love of learning. Those dispositions and that is through play. It's through playful opportunities.
Exploration.
And play is that mechanism to learn. Rather than this is the whole purpose of early years. We just let them play and let them be, and we stand back as adults. And I guess it is that perception that you are not kind of doing much there. Actually, no, it's supporting children to learn how to learn and building those foundations for the rest of their lives, like you say, to have a love of learning, to be a lifelong learner.
And what's happening in those playful moments, how is that brain developing in those moments? We were lucky enough to listen to Gemma Goldberg recently, and we had one of our parent trustees with us at an awards event, and he left kind of blown away by what he'd learned from that little snippet of information with Gemma on brain development and what we're doing now. He's been a parent trustee and supporter of us for such a long time. That then took us up another level for him in his admiration of what we do, I guess, as a profession. And we also took from that, how do we articulate ourselves? Are we strong enough when we talk about brain development and those things that happen when a child consistently repeats like a banging motion or, those things that children do that we all take for granted or ignore sometimes because they're just doing them, or try and stop because they're repeatedly banging on the table or whatever motion it is they're doing. But actually, when you then talk about the neurons and the connections that are being made in their brain, it really brings it to life. So how often do we do that? Do we talk that way?
We always say, to work with children from birth to 5, it surely has got to be the best job you can do. When you look at that, the brain development from birth to 5, actually, the impact you can have, just one person can have alone. Yet we're in a profession where they don't know if their main part of their job anymore is changing nappies and, you know,
the joy. They're the things that happen. They're the things that have to happen, and you have to do them well, and you have to do them with care. Important, but the joy comes from did you see what he just did? You know, and then sharing that with parents, or the same for a parent the first time they stand up or they walk. But they, you know, for us, those tiny little stepping stones that you see, that you notice, and you link to what you know about theory. They're the joyful moments for us. But I don't know that we share them loudly and proudly enough. And if you're going to do this, and you're going to do this proudly, you have to do it with confidence and with knowledge. And I think because lack of motivation and this feeling of being the poor relation, we've got stuck in doing all of that instead of reaching out, being more researchful, giving yourself some joy, that researching, and when you see things in practice, gives you more confidence. The more knowledge you have that you then can use in practice, that you can share with other people, gives you more and more confidence. So it's kind of shutting the door to all this rubbish and saying, come on, let's reinvent ourselves. Let's come together. And we are together as a profession.
Because the children deserve it. The children deserve that, of how important those first 5 years are in their life.
We can absolutely make a difference. We can change this world for our children and for ourselves if we do it together.
And you mentioned research there, and I know you talk about researchful practice, don't you?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you mean by that? Because obviously I talk a lot about research-informed practice and practice-informed research as well, and vice versa, and the fact that it's so important to link theory to practice and research to practice and understand why you're doing things. So what do you mean by researchful practice in your settings?
It is that. So I think we started talking about researchful practice because people think research and theory is in books and it happened by old people like me.
In academia.
But actually research and theory happens every day in everything that we do. So if we see something, we'll point it out to the educator and say, did you see what just happened? And what you just did prove that theory of, or challenge that theory of, that children under 2 don't have empathy, or whatever it is. And so in their practice, they are constantly maybe questioning and challenging, and that's it, doing things in a researchful way. And that's not every moment of every day, but something may happen and it will bring a question, and a team member can bring it to us and kind of, I've just seen. That's researchful practice for me, is that what you see in practice triggers something that you know from theory or in your child development knowledge, and you want to find out more. And we do that together.
What a fantastic skill and, I guess, habit or value to teach children as well, and be co-researchers with children, rather than having kind of that expectation that the adult has all of the answers, the teacher has all of the answers, actually being that. And it's a very Reggio thing, and I know you mentioned Reggio Emilia before and you visited, and that's very much their values of being co-researchers with children, co-learners.
It's that being on a journey and not knowing what you're going to discover together. And I, having taken some of these ways of working for the last maybe 10 years, it is much more interesting, and children bring such interesting topics to the table. Their interests and the things that fascinate them are so much more interesting than ours. They do throw up questions all the time, and actually
very curious.
We're not bothered about ever finding answers to things. We like to find more questions.
And that our research projects over the last 10 years have all started with that question from a child that we don't know the answer, we don't know where it's going to go, and we explore it together. And
one is, why does the moon follow us to nursery every day? I don't know. Let's have a think. Let's have a look. But we had parents, parents are involved in those things as well. And that's how you raise the profile of this profession, is parents being involved in those things as well. And not just seeing us as these people who change nappies and look after, care for their children. Of course we do that. Of course we do. But there is much more. There is much more.
Yeah.
And that question, I can think of parents, and I can think of that particular dad and how he spoke on a little video about his child's experiences and that whole group's experiences of the moon and what questions they raised through that exploration that went on for over a year. For him, for him, they learned a lot from it as a family, but they also learned a lot about the capability of their daughter. And I think that's the other thing. We're talking about our capabilities and our image, but to make children's learning visible and valued, we kind of have to raise the profile of both. It's raising the profile of the profession, which also raises the importance of 0 to 5.
Definitely.
I think, and the capability of what they are capable of between those ages, if we make sure that their physical needs, the care and everything is there, that sense of belonging, that attachment, that trust, and all those care needs are met. Oh my goodness, the capability of children would blow people's minds if they only but knew. But we focus on what we focus on. How much does it cost? How can we offer it free? How can we focus on all of that? And actually our children's education is getting lost in that.
Yeah, you're right.
What's actually happening with our 0 to 5-year-olds is lost in all of that.
And it's so hard to find the right balance, because obviously those big questions about free childcare or accessible childcare, are really important in order to be able to access the early years and to keep settings open. But we mustn't get lost in all of that and forget what the value is. Why are we sending our children to early years settings? Not just because we want to send parents to work. Actually, there's so much more there. And it is, like we were saying, there's so many bigger issues to tackle here, and societal issues around services and multi-agency working, ensuring that the services are fit for purpose and accessible by parents. And there's such massive shifts in society that need to be had, and also around, like you were saying, researchful practice, child development, status and practitioners' knowledge. That is very much, as we mentioned, qualification based. And actually when you mention other countries, things, it's difficult comparing because things are so different there culturally and societally, in terms of their qualifications are that a lot higher, training is a lot more rigorous. They have to have, I believe in certain Scandinavian countries, they have to have a master's even to teach in early years, I believe, or at least their version, it's higher than ours.
But they're still called, they were called carers. They're actually called carers in Sweden if they are, if they're at level 3. And yes, you need a degree to be a teacher. And again, that's another question that I would know. I have my thoughts and opinions, and I think there are also some skills and experience and some ways of being, that researchfulness, that you can work at that level. And there's a way of assessing that, I think, without always just looking at the paper qualification. I think there are ways of assessing people's competence, the same as we talk about with our children. There are ways of assessing competence.
Yeah, for sure.
Who says they're always about this academic level, this meeting? Another podcast.
Another podcast that is very much needed around qualifications and training around early years, and how do we prepare our educators to be educators or teachers or whatever we call them. And actually there just seems to be so many qualifications out there, so many different ones, and associated with QTS or not QTS apprenticeships and placements, no placements, and it just has got so complicated, really muddy.
And I think it shows a lack of care and a lack of value. And I think in a profession that's not what it looks like. If this is a profession that you want to be proud to be in, it is time to tidy it up, to put our house in order. And again, we can only do that together. So it's reaching out. We want to reach out and say, please be in this conversation with us, to make our children's learning visible, to kind of save childhood, put an SOS out. Can we be together? Can we try and do this together? We're all running our own businesses. There are enough children. The marketplace is saturated with different nurseries and other preschools and everything. There are enough children. This is something we need to be together on. I think we are setting up the first 5 years of a child's life to be a future citizen of this country. Do we care enough?
Yes. Yeah. So that is a huge responsibility. I think this is probably a good way to wrap it up. That was a really nice kind of quote from you there. Thank you. We've addressed so many really interesting things there. I think we've I guess almost like opened many cans of worms.
Questions.
Yes, but it's exactly what we need, sparking people's thinking and debate and curiosity, and hopefully listeners will really take this further. So those of you who are listening or watching on YouTube, please do share this episode with others and really begin to kind of spark those debates and reflections and discussions in your settings, and hopefully more widely
join up.
Joining up. Definitely. It's so important to come together, and as the voice of early childhood is called the voice of early childhood, sharing those voices. So please do share the episode and reach out to us. It would be great to hear from you both again on some of these things that we mentioned. That should be probably another episode here and there. So it'll be really interesting to further connect. And definitely hear from the sector or profession what different views are. It's so important to be able to have, I guess, with people listening to this, they'll be able to relate, and think, actually, I'm not on my own thinking these things. And that's a really important thing, like you mentioned a few times there, that kind of sense of belonging as a profession and cohesiveness.
We talked this year about being brave, having our voices heard. Our children can't be heard if we don't use our voices. So
exactly, we need to be our own advocates.
And
advocates for our children.
We're really grateful for the opportunity. So thank you.
And thank you very much for reaching out. And this, actually, we mentioned advocacy now. So anyone who's listening, if you enjoyed this episode, you might also really enjoy the episode with Dr. Nathan Archer and Dr. Joe Albin Clark, who actually discuss advocacy, agency and rights in early childhood. So that's an interesting link there as well. And recently we also had Lewis Fogarty on, who, again, linking to what we discussed here as well, he talks about professional confidence and how do we have the confidence to speak out. So, people are having these conversations, which is fantastic. So, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for joining. And I'm sure we'll hear from you again. And for all those who are listening, the links to Carlie's and Jackie's article is that's in the episode description. And the links to the articles I've just mentioned and podcast episodes are also in the episode description. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And thank you both for joining.
No problem. Thank you. Bye.